saw my hand on the window, which Travis mentioned at one point. So I changed the tone. And just two quick things. Marianne, thank you so much for saying those kind words about Paul Sakai at the last meeting. I really appreciate that. And Stephanie, great job on the Hale work that you did. Pat and I were discussing it today. I like it a lot.
Well, it is now 6 o'clock, so I will call this meeting to order. Good evening and welcome everyone to the August 14, 2023 meeting of the Westwood Select Board. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, on March 29, 2023, Governor Maura Healey signed into law an act making appropriations for the fiscal year 2023 to provide for supplementing certain existing appropriations and for certain other activities and projects. This act includes an extension until March 31, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions. This meeting tonight, August 14, 2023, of the Select Board will be conducted via remote participation. I hereby grant permission to Westwood Media Center to record the meeting. And is there anyone else who wishes to record the meeting? Seeing no affirmative responses. Again, good evening and welcome, everyone. We'll go right into the chair's update. And as my first item, I am very pleased to recognize two residents who recently retired from their positions as co-chairs of Westwood's Commission on Disability. The first is Yetta Meglin, who served on the COD for 17 years, many of those years as vice chair or co-chair, and who shared of her lived experience in very important ways that have improved the lives of many disabled people in Westwood. Thank you, Yetta. I see that you are here, along with the second person I want to recognize, Anne Berry Goodfellow. Anne raised her 4 children in Westwood and professionally worked as an attorney for the Office of the General Counsel for the Department of Education and also as staff counsel to the Special Legislative Commission on Special Education Reform. Anne brought her passion and her skills to Westwood, where for over 35 years, Anne served on the Commission on Disability and served for many, many of those years as chair. Anne has played a crucial role in improving access in numerous town buildings and spaces, including the installation of a chairlift at Town Hall, the installation of a lift for the recreation pool, the renovation of the School Street playground. In addition, she provided valuable input to our open space and recreation plan, the comprehensive plan, and the design of the new library and the Pine Hill Elementary School. These two women have truly been unsung heroines in Westwood, and I want to publicly recognize them and thank them on behalf of the town for your extraordinary public service to the people of Westwood. Thank you, Yetta and Anne. And
thank you, Anne. It was kind, and yeah, it's been a journey. So I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, with Anne as the chair, and then we just have followed each other along for the last, it's almost 22 years. So yeah, I'm not the unsung hero. Anne is the unsung hero. So I did what I was told, right? But thank you.
Well, you are both. Anne, if you're saying something, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I just unmuted. Yetta is very humble in her remarks. It was a great collaboration and partnership over those years, and along with the many community members, parents, individuals with disabilities, and government officials who have worked all those times collaboratively to make our community a more inclusive and welcoming place to everyone, including individuals who have disabilities. and their families. And so we stand on the shoulders of, some of you will remember the name Ben Beal, who was the chair for many years. Jane Forsberg was involved, Shirley Haywood, and many, many individuals who worked, again, as I say, collaboratively with, individuals with disabilities in our community, town officials, the people from the planning board, the zoning board, the DPW, the zoning enforcement officer, and of course, Mike Gillette and now Chris Coleman have been very key to all that we have accomplished together. So thank you, Marianne, for this acknowledgement, and I appreciate your taking the time to note this, our stepping down from our current responsibilities. And as I have said to you personally, I'm not going away from this work that I have been so involved with for so many years, but I am thrilled that we have so many younger individuals in our community who have a knowledge of what their family members need at this point, and who are willing to step forward and move the work into the next time period. So I thank the members of the select board who've been very, very supportive in all this, as well as the town officials who've been very supportive right along.
Thank you very much, both of you. We're going to move on to the second item in my update, which is that the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, the Engineering Group, and the Department of Public Works will hold a public hearing on Thursday, September 28th at 7 p.m. in the Downey School Cafeteria on the Canton Street Corridor project. A design public hearing will be held to present the design for the proposed reconstruction of Canton Street, or the Canton Street Corridor project, to include a proposed sidewalk and shared use path. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with the opportunity to become fully acquainted with the proposed reconstruction on Canton Street. The public hearing notice is posted on the town website. We encourage any resident interested in learning more about the proposed project to attend the September 28th public hearing, which again will be at 7 p.m. in the Downey Street Cafeteria. And with that, I will turn it over to Chris Coleman for the town administrator's update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to keep it very brief because we have a very full agenda this evening. I did want to just share with the community, we did receive earlier this month information from the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, also known as GFOA, has awarded a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting to the town of Westwood for its annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. This report has been judged by an impartial panel to meet the high standards of the program, which includes demonstrating a constructive spirit of full disclosure, to clearly communicate its financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the report. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area for governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by the government and its management. The town has received this in the past, but this should not go as something that we always get or we always earn. This is a true attest to the work, collaborative work from the select board, the FinCom, town meeting members, and also and especially our finance team, both elected and appointed personnel. So I want to thank all of them for all of their hard work and the support of town meeting and the work of the select board and the FinCom.
Thank you, Chris. Our next agenda item is executive session. The select board will be going into executive session to discuss two issues. The first, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to discuss strategy with respect to the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, Hale Education, Inc. And the second, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 22FG, to comply with any general law for review of executive session minutes, all of which would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governing body if discussion were in open session. We estimate that we will return to open session at 6:30 p.m. But as you know, we might be a few minutes earlier than that or a few minutes later than that. The board will be returning to open session, and with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board move into executive session for the aforementioned reasons.
Roll call, Joe?
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you don't have a second.
Oh,
Thank-
I thought I snuck a second in there. I'll second that.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Ahern. Roll call, I jumped the gun. Joe?
Same aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Oh, shoot. You distract me.
Okay, we are now back in open session. Good evening again, everyone. We are moving. And with us, we have Gail Mann. Welcome. And we understand you are here seeking approval for the 2023 Interfaith Mini Walk for Hunger. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, that's it.
And the plan is for Sunday, October 23rd, 2023, beginning at Temple Beth David for a 3-mile walk, starting at 2 p.m. and ending around 5 p.m. Do I have that right?
I believe it's the 22nd, but let me check. It's on the Sunday. Yeah, it's the 22nd.
Sunday, October 22nd, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Okay. I stand corrected. And this is the same route that you've been using for the last number of years.
That's correct. Yes.
Great. Any questions from my colleagues?
None from me.
Oh, great idea.
If not, I will entertain a motion.
Okay, I move the select board approve the 2023 request from the Interfaith Mini Walk for Hunger on Sunday, October 22nd, beginning at Temple Beth David for a 3-mile walk that will begin at 2 p.m. and end around 5 p.m.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much, Gail, to you and for everyone who organizes this great event
Thank
every
you.
year. It's a wonderful event. Thank you.
Very much.
All right, moving on our agenda, we have a regulatory agreement with respect to an affordable housing unit on School Street. And with us, we have Nora Loughnane, our Community and Economic Development Director. Good evening, Nora. We have Amanda Wolf, our Housing and Land Use Planner. Good evening. And I believe we've got Jane O'Donnell from WAHA and Alyssa Franco from WAHA. And is Lou here as well? Don't see Lou. Well, welcome all of you. Nora, are you taking us through this?
Thank you. So I'll get started and all the others can jump in where needed. So this was before you several months ago in the form of a local action unit application. This involves a property on School Street, a single family home that was purchased by WAHA to be offered as rental affordable housing. And it went through the process of the local action unit application. And in that process, there were some very minor tweaks to the proposed regulatory agreement. Nothing significant, change of terms. For instance, we had referred to WAHA as the owner and to the home as a project. They wanted to refer to it as the developer and the development. So just very small changes along those lines. But otherwise, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities has now approved the local action unit application and has finalized the regulatory agreement. So if it's satisfactory to the select board, you can authorize your chair to endorse this agreement. Then we would ask WAHA's chairs to also endorse it, and then we would send it back to Housing and Livable Communities for their final endorsement. It would then be recorded, and once that's done, then WAHA will be free to lease the unit to an eligible family or eligible household.
Thank you, Nora. Any questions from my colleagues?
No, just Nora, in terms of when it's officially listed on SHI, is it now officially on the rolls, or is it once it's?
It will be eligible for listing once it's been leased.
Okay, thank you.
And I think it's a great location. I'm excited about it.
It's a terrific house. It'll be
Yeah.
a very lucky household that goes in there.
Indeed. All right, well, if there are no other questions, I will entertain a motion on this.
I move the select board authorize the chair to endorse the regulatory agreement for a single-family home on School Street to be restricted as an affordable rental unit and send the agreement to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, formerly known as the Department of Housing and Community Development, for further endorsement.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you very much, Nora, Amanda, Jane, Alyssa. Thank you for your great work on this.
Kudos to all.
Okay, moving on our agenda for scheduled action. The next 3 items have to do with the fire department. The first will be a discussion of the operational study, our second discussion of that, which will be followed by a discussion about fire department staffing, which will be followed by a further discussion on the feasibility study with respect to the fire station. So with that, we have with us Travis Miller from Criterion Associates. Welcome, Travis.
Good evening, all.
You were with us at our last meeting, and we had some follow-up questions for you. So we welcome you back for a further presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it, members of the board and public and staff who are here this evening. So we went back and looked through the data set that we had. As a reminder, we had a data set that covered a 4.5-year period, 17 through actually almost 5 years, 17 through most of 2022. One of the things that's interesting to note is that, as you would expect, as most communities experienced, there was a spike in activity in 2020 due to COVID, increased calls for service. There was an increase in the number of units that were being sent to calls on average in 19 and 20, which is also something that we saw nationally, which was really an attempt to spread people out in apparatus as well as to respond appropriately to the kinds of calls that people were seeing. The other thing that we examined was the impact on changes in the community that MAPC, your planning organization, expects Westwood to experience as kind of what they described as a mature suburb, which is a very nice way of saying it. And that the biggest change that the community should expect to deal with from MAPC's perspective is an aging of the community. So we went and looked at what might the implications be from a change in age cohorts across the community over a period of time. Nationally, we know that the biggest user of EMS services are actually people under the age of 1, but not that they are the ones calling 911, but they are the biggest source per capita of 911 and emergency room utilization. Following that, it's, as one would expect, it's people over the age of 65. When we looked at the potential impact of the changes that MAPC expects you to experience as a community, we still don't see a significant increase in workload that would be attributable to that change or to population growth as expected to occur in the town. So workload should stay consistent with the findings that we had in the report earlier. And our recommendations with respect to staffing and deployment of personnel remain consistent with what we gave you in our last meeting about a month ago, because of those expected changes in population and therefore demand on emergency services in the town. COVID was a pretty unexpected and it's the kind of event that planners have no way of predicting what those impacts might be. But we've seen an increase in workload that occurred during COVID, and then the growth in calls slowed right back down again to what you experienced historically, which is a 3 to 4% growth in call for service demand and runs.
Okay. Anything else that you wanted to add, Travis?
No, not right now. I'm happy to answer any questions though.
All right, I'm going to open this up to my colleagues for questions.
Travis, you just said something about a 3 to 4% increase in calls. It sort of trended over time, but
Correct.
You're also using the MAPC data, which basically is holding Westwood's population relatively flat, over the 20-year period between 2010 and 2030.
Correct.
We know that we're well beyond that already. And so I'm just, so are you saying that despite our population growth, our data has returned to normal trend of 3 to 4% call growth?
Right. So two separate.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
The follow-up to that is, can you highlight any particular drivers of that change?
So two separate things. Great questions. There's a couple questions in that question. So yes, we use the MAPC data because they're the official planning organization, and we're looking from them again for that kind of 20-year trend that you mentioned. And we recognize that the population in town has exceeded that, and I presume that that's because of additional multifamily housing that's been constructed in the town that MAPC wasn't forecasting as sort of a public policy initiative that is clearly impacting Westwood as well as a number of other communities in the 128 to 495 corridor. With respect to the calls for service, that call for service growth is independent of or a proxy for, depending on how you like to look at it, the growth in population. So there is rarely a straight line relationship between population growth described like that simplistically, right? If I add 100 people, I should expect to see 10 more calls for service per year. That nationally is roughly a true statement. But when we looked at the call for service growth and the change over time, what we were looking at was your actual call for service growth and change over time without regard to the population impact. In terms of what's driving that, I suspect that there are three things that have driven that in Westwood as they have in your neighboring communities. Number one, COVID changed the way that people made use of the 911 system. It changed the way that the 911 system responded to calls for service. Different communities made different public policy choices. Different populations made different choices about whether to call 911 or to drive themselves to the hospital or just to stay at home because they felt like they were going to get sicker if they went to the hospital. Yep.
Can I just, so I guess where I'm getting a little confused there is I thought that the 3 to 4% was sort of the trend over time, independent of COVID.
It is, and it's independent of your population as forecast by MAPC also. It's what you actually have experienced. The drivers behind that, I mean, population change, COVID is a bubble. You can look at the data and you can see this big bump that occurred in 2020. If you normalize around COVID, some communities saw a drop in calls for service. You saw an increase. I think the other drivers are your additional multifamily housing units. They tend to be higher sources per capita of call for service volume. And a fascinating paradox of increased public access to non-emergency room level urgent care services, which are highly risk averse organizations, so that they're great. And I use them. My kids have used them. I'm sure some of you have used them, where it's going to be a couple stitches. You can go into an urgent care and get a couple stitches, or you can go sit in the ER for 5 hours to get a couple stitches. That's a great use for that. What is scary is when somebody walks in and says, yeah, I don't know, I've just been feeling weird and I'm a little out of sorts, or I'm having a little trouble breathing. Those organizations' typical response is to call 911 for you. So when we looked at your call for service data on the station location analysis, one of the interesting things that came up was, wow, why is there like this bubble of activity over in the Wegmans Plaza? And it's like, oh, there's an urgent care facility over there in that vicinity, which has clearly driven a number of calls for service that have been, and you're not alone. A number of communities have suddenly found themselves going to addresses that they're not accustomed to going to, only to find out that there's an urgent care that's come to town and opened up shop in a strip mall someplace. So I think those are the drivers. Again, even at this growth, you're under 10 calls per day, which is a standard threshold in larger organizations where they'd say, oh, I need to add another engine company. And you have two. Now you have geography that you're dealing with and road network that you're dealing with, which is why we recommended that you staff 2 engine companies and 2 ambulances. But the addition of a call for service per day is not enough to justify staffing up another engine company, in my opinion. Good question, though. Thank you.
Joe, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So where do you think this leads us, Travis, in say the next 5 years as far as demand?
No different, really. I mean, you might see yourself getting into double-digit calls. You'll certainly have days that will be beyond the busy of people who've been with the department for a long time's memory from when they were early in the department. You should expect that as you get a little bit bigger, as you add more multifamily housing, you'll see spikes in activity. But there's nothing in the data that we've been provided with that suggests that you're going to see some explosive change in call for service. Now, I say that sitting here looking at a screen with the impacts of COVID on your call for service volume. It had a highly unpredicted, significant impact. I mean, it took you from 6.5 calls for service per day to 8.5, almost 9 calls for service per day. Percentage basis, that's a big increase. But in terms of how you're taxing resources that are spread out across 24 hours a day, even if you assume that they're busy 14, 16, 18 hours a day, that's still not, you're getting concurrent calls for service, but you're not seeing standing demand for 5, 6, 7, 8 transport units or something, significantly crazy like that. So I think in 5 years, you'll say, oh, okay, these 2 units are busier than they were back in 2023. But I don't think that you'll find yourself in a position where you're turning back saying, wow, I'm really glad we added another engine company back in 2025, because that really made the difference for us. I just don't see that in your future, unless something drastic were to occur in terms of land use, or which you as a community have done. I mean, you had the University Place project was a massive change in land use for the community, but unless something like that were to occur again, I don't see anything that suggests that you're going to see growth like that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Travis from my colleagues?
Travis, the other question that I had last time that I don't know that I see a real answer to inside of this update it doesn't have to do with call volume. It does have to do with what I'll call time on task, which is got to then impact availability of units, right? And that's all related to the closure of Norwood Hospital and the number of runs that need to be made, where we've got to transport someone into Boston or to some other further location. How will the reopening of Norwood Hospital potentially impact the availability of our units? Sort of they reduce the time on task, because I have to believe that since June of 2020, when Norwood closed, there has been a bump in that side.
Yeah, I call it refill rate. Same thing, right? How quickly do I get my resource back? If not in, at least close enough to town that they're able to respond effectively. I think you'll see somewhere between a 15 and, I mean, it's going to depend on the time of day and traffic and all the other things that you guys are very familiar with. But you'll probably see a half hour or more reduction in that refill or turnaround time based on units. And if you spread that across 10 calls a day, 9 calls a day, you're looking at a time savings of 4 or 5 hours across the course of a day, which means that your risk of concurrency probably drops by 20 or 30%, which is a pretty significant difference when you're talking about needing a third unit or not for transport purposes. I can get you that number. I apologize. It's a very good question. I can get you that number. I'll get it to Chris.
Okay, anything else for Travis?
I have one question, Marianne.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Since my hand's working.
Sorry, I missed it. It
No,
faded
no,
into
no,
your sunset.
I'm jealous of his background too.
Yeah, well, you're the one that saw my hand on the window last time, so I had to do something, Travis. Let me just two quick things. I think we have to take the outliers and segregate them into one corner of our decision, meaning the COVID and Norwood Hospital, both extremes. The second thing is, Travis, do I have this correct that I'm not interested in a third engine company? I don't believe it's necessary. But what you're recommending is to have 2 engine companies and 2 ambulances available, which would bring you up to a staff of 10 members plus command officer per shift. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Well, seeing no other questions for Travis, I think we can transition into our discussion about staffing. And with us, we have Chief Deckers. And I'd like to hear from you, Chief, in terms of your thoughts based on what you've heard from the operational study and what your recommendations are with respect to staffing.
So I want to thank everyone for letting me come before you this evening and giving me this opportunity. I think the report validates what we have been saying for at least the last several years that I've been here, that the right number is 11. And now, how do we get to 11? And that's going to be the challenge. We're coming out of a system that relied very heavily on recall. And when I say recall, what that is calling in staff that are off duty to fill the gaps when gaps occur. So we had a very reliant system for that, which was actually very effective in years past when our employees actually lived in town. There's several reasons why it doesn't work anymore. One being that many of our employees no longer can afford to live in or near Westwood. The other big one is that many families now are dual source or dual income source families. And so when our members are off, their spouses or partners are at work, and we have such a young department that is actually developing their families, which is awesome. We have so many young kids that come around and all that kind of stuff. It's awesome to see. They have to stay home with the kids. So we're losing that ability to respond back in times of emergency to fill gaps. So now we have to change our mentality and go to a staffing model that staffs, as Travis pointed out, enough personnel to handle the volume. And then we're still going to be able to rely on our mutual aid call agreements that we have with all our surrounding partners, because no fire department can handle every single call that will ever come their way. It's not even possible. Even the city of Boston relies on mutual aid at times. So what I'm asking, where we're at, because of where we've been moving and because of the recall system, is that we start to progress, which the town did a phenomenal job, because when University Station started to come online, our staffing was not at 10. So the town funded staffing to go, our general staffing was at, a much lower number, 6, then, 7. And now we're at 10. That's who's assigned to a shift, but because of vacation and leaves and all that stuff, and by contract, we were allowed to go to 6. We never went to 6. We were always at 7 when I got here. I brought it to 9 during the day. It was at 7 at night. After Norwood Hospital went down, we went to 8 at night. And that's where we're at. I think we need to immediately get to 9, and that I would like to do that as early as tomorrow if the board gives us their blessing to do that. That comes at a cost to the community, because when you're adding coverage, it's added in overtime, and the net impact to us, we estimate right now, is going to cost us potentially an extra $385,000 to $400,000 above what we already have budgeted. So that's what we're coming in front of you this evening, saying this could be where we're going to be at the end of the year, over our budget by that much money. But I think it's very important, because what we've seen from Travis's report, all the data I've sent up over the last 5 years, is 9 is the minimum number, and 9 does not give us 2 ambulances 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The only way to do that is to get to the 11. But to get to the 11, it's not an inexpensive path. So we have to figure out what the best path is, make it sustainable, so that we as an organization can be sustainable, because God forbid we have another situation like COVID. We were in such a great financial position as a town. We never had to lay off any of our members. There were several fire departments around us at the beginning of COVID that hit that wall and had to lay their members off. So we want to make sure everything that we do is sustainable. We grow it in the right direction. That's why I'm looking to go to 9 immediately as of tomorrow. And then we'll work through the budgeting process in FY24 and FY25 to get to the proposed number of 11, which we have been saying 11. Travis validated 11. And another update for all of you is I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware, everyone on the call tonight is aware. In February, I was given the approval by Chris Coleman to apply for a SAFER grant. The SAFER grant will allow us to get to that 11 once we're ready to go. And our SAFER grant is $1,038,227. So that will allow us to bring 4 people on, and 4 extra people to get our staffing to 11. And then our overtime has to come to be able to cover person for person to 11. And now we're working through all those numbers with the recent contract negotiations. We have to get all those numbers to make sure they're lined up, so that we apply that budget to you and to the FinCom, so that we look for what steps we want to go to get there. So that's where we are with that. The staffing plans all called for 9 as a minimum. We need to get to 9. I would like to do that as early as tomorrow if you are on board.
Madam Chair, if I just wanted to specify something, I don't want anyone to be misunderstand what the chief just said. The chief did apply for the SAFER grant. We have not been awarded the SAFER grant. So that we are still in contention for the SAFER grant. The last update that we received, that our application was still being reviewed, but we have not been notified of it. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand thinking that the chief announced that we've received the SAFER grant yet.
Thank you for that clarification, Chris.
And Chris and Chief, on that point, what is the horizon on that? What are we looking at? Obviously, no one has a crystal ball, but
So that grant is a $300 million grant, and the metrics on it is they're looking to make 300 awards nationwide. So at this point, I'm taking it as a good note that we haven't been sent a letter saying thank you for your application, but no thank you. So we're still in the running. They were evaluated and started to be evaluated in June. So here we are out in August, the middle of August. I think we're still in the running from everything that I'm getting from our regional representative. My fingers are crossed that they're going to grant us that. That will just help us a long way moving that forward.
And Chief, one question on your comments. Can you just flesh out for us, what is the difference functionally between 8 and 9 at night for the department and for residents?
So 8 and 9, when we say 9 is the minimum, so what 9 gets us is a shift commander, 1 full-time ambulance 24 hours a day, and 1 engine 24 hours a day. The 9 members, then the last piece is an engine, which will either be an engine or an ambulance depending on need. That's what we get at 9. When we go to 8, the captain has to leave their vehicle, their main job as a shift commander, jump on an engine, and then run as a company level officer instead of the shift commander, which is basically the orchestra, and running the scenes before myself or the assistant chief can get there. It also takes out our ability, if we're running at 8, takes our ability to get a second ambulance out. So at night, we only have 1 ambulance, and we have to rely heavily on mutual aid. And as we've seen with all of our mutual aid partners, they're all suffering the same issues. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we can't. And sometimes they're busy and we have to pull ambulances from further away, which delays our response to our residents. At 9, we don't have that problem. We are still browning out, which when I say browning out, basically means that we are taking the engine and the staff and the engine jumps to the ambulance. But at 9, we can get that second ambulance out at night. At 8, we cannot. That's the major hit to that. And with anytime we're under 11, you're always going to be taking that either an ambulance out of service or the engine or ladder out of service. So one of those pieces is going out of service.
Well, I agree that we should immediately get to 9 at night. But that's a discussion we need to fully have here tonight. Questions from my colleagues for the chief?
So, Chief, if I heard you correctly, the cost to the community, this current unbudgeted cost to the community for getting to 9 is 380 to 410, somewhere in that range. Is that what I heard you say?
That would be correct. That's what we have it estimated at now based on our current contracts and everything that are in place. And what that does is that looks at the use that we had last year and the projected use for this year for leave types.
Okay. And for clarity's sake, I thought I heard you say to get to 11, it was an incremental $1,038,000.
No.
Just on base salary. Is that, but then his overtime needs to be factored into that?
No. So the $1,038,000 is what we submitted the grant for, to add 4 people down the road. To get to 11 is a much bigger number that I'm still running out with Stephanie to make sure my numbers are correct. But so we're looking at the 400,000 delta right now. Then what does it take to add that 1 additional person for basically every single hour that we work, because we've never been covering it before, and then adding another person plus getting 11 new employees. So the numbers are drastically different, but I don't want to throw out a number yet until I've had a chance to have Stephanie take a look at all my numbers and make sure that I'm accurate, because I don't want to send anybody an
Yeah, I
ambulance.
understand. I'm asking now as I know we're headed into budget planning season for fiscal year 25. And, you know, the thing that's, I guess, on my mind is if we were to get that SAFER grant, how much of the incremental headcount would it cover, and for how long? You know, I thought I heard from a previous meeting where, you know, it pays for X percent of them and it winds down over time, or does it pay for all of them at, you know, 100% for how long?
So this offering is 100% for 3 years. So what that $1 million basically takes into account 3 years of base salary, just base salary of the members, because you can't put it, the grant doesn't allow you to apply for estimated overtime or anything like that. So it's strictly their salaries to add those people. So it would offset whatever delta that we have over 3 years at 100%. So each year is 1/3 of that, and so it's 300,000 and change a year. We would be able to use to offset the cost to add those 4 additional personnel to bring us to 11 for our staffing. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it's helpful. The last piece, I guess, that, and this is really getting more into planning for fiscal 25, I think, is if 100% of your base salary is, you know, what you carry, and you carry a percentage of what overtime has run historically, how much over 100% is that? Because if I'm thinking of $1 million as the base for getting these 4 people, what is the on top that you think? And you may not be ready to answer that based on your conversations with Stephanie and Chris, but you know, I got to believe you have an idea of what that percentage tends to run currently.
I don't have a percentage yet on it in that number. But I mean, it's something I can get you, you know, in the coming weeks and get it back to you, so you have a better idea.
I'm just looking at it is $1 million, you know, does it run at 20%, so it's 1.2, or does it run at 30%, so it's 1.3? You know, I'm just curious as to, you know, as we get into the budget planning, what we're looking at going forward. That's all. I'm distracted at this point. I'm distracting from your original ask of going to 9.
Right. So the bump to go to 11, you have to add the 4 salaries of the new employees, and then you have to also add the additional overtime, because you're at that point going to be covering 11 for 11. So every time somebody's out, we're covering for them, which is the right way to do it, so that we're providing the same level of service during the day and in the evening. So that's the important thing. I just don't know what that number is yet in comparison to where we are today and what the impact is going to be, because I was really focusing on getting to 9 out of the gate to bring us to a level playing field, and then plan the event and how we're going to plan to get to 10 and then to 11.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, if I could, I want to just get back to the SAFER grant to add to my prior question. How likely is it that we would hear by, say, early 24 on that, would you say?
I hope, like I said, my fingers are crossed. The problem was the last award took them almost 12 months to distribute. So I don't have a true crystal ball to say, hey, it will all be expensed by this date. The only good thing we have going for us is the prior one, if I'm remembering this correctly, I think they didn't have the funding in place, And we had to fight, like I took a visit down to DC to meet with our congressmen and representatives to go through all this and drive home the importance of these. Right now, the money is available. So that's a plus for us. So I'm hoping we're going to see it much sooner. And then FEMA's made a lot of changes, and they're putting a bunch of new people into place. So we're hoping the turnaround is going to be much quicker with the new people that they have there. But I don't have a time frame. I'm hoping before our major portion of our budget is, we'll have a better idea.
Thank you. Joe?
Thanks, Marianne. First, I agree with you that be nice to get to 9 now. My understanding is if we go to 9 now, 24/7, that will give us 2 ambulances 24/7. Is that correct, John?
No, what it gives us 1.5, Joe. So we're still going to be at 9. We still are going to guarantee ourselves that extra ambulance, but to get that extra ambulance, I have to take an engine out of play. 11 is the right number to give us 2 ambulances. 9 gives us basically 1.5. So the half being that either I have an ambulance in place or I have an engine in place, one or the other. 11 gives me both.
But if we run both ambulances out the door, we don't have an engine company and we'd have to rely on mutual aid. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. My second question is for Molly. Molly, I used to figure 20, I'm dovetailing onto Rob. I used to figure 20% for non-productive time. What number are you using now?
There's not a number necessarily that we use for overtime. The number I always use when we're going for a grant for the total amount for an employee, salary, benefits, fringe benefits is typically 35%. So you're looking at 135%. Because public safety is so different, the overtime analysis there would have to be tweaked a little bit, and it could be a little bit higher.
Okay, so use 35. And
Joe, this is Travis. In my experience, I mean, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. Your 20% number is not a terrible place to start with respect to non-productive time, particularly in a young workforce where you're looking at the impacts of vacation, sick, and training. It's not going to help you if you get a long-term disability or if you get a vacancy. That number would certainly go up. And as I'm sure the chief can attest, filling paramedic vacancies in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and everywhere in New England is not a task that people are running up to the front of the line to volunteer to be in charge of. It's really, really hard right now.
Thank you for that segue to my next question is, how quickly can we get 4 firefighter paramedics on the trucks if we were to do something soon?
So, Joe, when we look at this in our system, we would love to be able to have paramedics, but as Travis said, you don't always get that. I would rather invest in the individual and get 4 people here because we're going to have them for 32 years and then send them to school. So, it's 10 weeks at the fire training, so they come back. They would have to be at a minimum EMT trained so that we could get them on. We have currently 2 people starting paramedic school in early September. They should be done within 18 months. And then the majority of our folks will be paramedics at that point. We bring on the 4 new people. Our goal would be to bring in paramedics if we can. But again, I would rather bring in great employees and train them to be paramedics. So it could take 2 years from the date of hire to have a fully certified firefighter paramedic.
Okay, so full disclosure, John, you and I already discussed this, and I'm not sure I appreciate your philosophy, but I have to tell you that I would be inclined towards offering some sort of incentive to get a fully trained paramedic firefighter on board sooner than the 18 months. And it's certainly something that's happening in the medical community. It's worked out well for us. So that's something, Marianne, I think we might want to explore down the road.
Can I offer one? anecdotal thing, just so you're aware of something that's going on around you.
Sure.
I know of 2 departments that I would describe as in the 128 to 495 band that are investing in geofencing around their neighboring departments' fire stations and using technology to target people that they see showing up at those places every 3rd day or 2 days out of every 8, because they know they're firefighters and they know they're on the 24-hour shift, and hitting them with targeted ads, trying to entice them to come work at their fire department from the fire department that they're working at currently. It's going to get really vicious. It already is.
No, I've seen it in the hospital industry, so I
Yes.
know what it's like, but I also know that it works. And I also know I hired 30 plus outstanding therapists during the COVID crisis. So it's just, I think, an option, Marianne, that we could put in our back pocket for now, discuss down the road. That's all.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on that, Joe, to ask Travis and the chief, what is the lay of the land with respect to trying to hire paramedics in Massachusetts? Trained paramedics.
In one word, it's ugly. The chief has a lot of peers that I'm sure he could, but would not want to name, who he's talked to, who are sitting there holding vacancies because the department has said they're going to hire nothing but a paramedic. I have this conversation because people know that I have friends who are chiefs in the Commonwealth who know that I work all over the country, and they're asking me, like, what are other places doing? When other places in the country are doing is they're starting to back away from public policy decisions that had 100% paramedic participation in line positions because they can't keep them. So in places like, high level service communities, like really, really high level service communities that are paying their paramedics a lot of money in places that are not that expensive to live compared to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, particularly in the eastern part of the Commonwealth, they're backing off of having 100% paramedic staffing because, number one, they can't get them. And number two, I think they've become convinced that you're better off having paramedics that do paramedic level skills more frequently than having everybody be a paramedic.
So
the staffing thing is an issue.
Yeah. And one of the big things, Joe, is the paramedic license, licensed individual is very important. Except if we look and say, hey, we're going to add 4 more people, I would always take a paramedic that's a great employee over somebody else in a heartbeat and train them. What
Sure.
we have found in the last 4 hiring processes, we get anywhere from 65 to 143 applications. Very few of them are already trained firefighters. They're paramedics or people in paramedic school looking to become firefighter paramedics. So we've brought in a couple of those that are great employees and work out for us. And that's what we would just continue down that path of doing. Adding, if we had to add, 16 new people, if we decided to go to a 14 on a shift and had to add 16 people, that's a whole different conversation, because it would be very difficult for us to do our job effectively because we are a paramedic service. But only adding 1 additional person per group for a short period of time does not have a detrimental effect to us. Would it be great to have them immediately? Sure. Would paying bonuses work? Maybe. But again, when we have people leaving one place to come to another place, I don't want them jumping next year to somewhere else. So we want to make sure that we're hiring somebody that's going to work with us for the next 32 years if we can. In many cases, that's what happens. They invest in a community, they get involved in a community, and they work their careers in that community. So I think we're a little different than other places where people can jump to wherever they want to jump. In many cases, what I've seen in my 30 plus years is people invest in an organization, in the fire service. So my goal is to look for the right people. If we can hire medics, absolutely jump in and hire medics. We do not we get plenty of applications. We do plenty of looking. We're not only looking at 5 people. I'm looking at 105 people when we make decisions. So I think we have that going for us because we're a great community. People want to come and work with the Westwood Fire Department. If you talk to our people on the street, which I know you do, Joe, it's people want to come here and work here. There's already people talking about it after, our contract got settled, and people are looking at knowing that we have applications. And once we open this, I won't be shocked if we have 85 to 100 applications to review. So I think we're in a good place.
Thank you.
So what I'd like to propose is that we support the recommendation to staff up to 9 at night immediately. And I want to throw that out for discussion with my colleagues.
All right, so
we can't sail across the ocean in one trip, but I agree with you, Marion. I think that's a great start.
I tend to agree, and Chris, Stephanie, Molly, I assume that there would be a plan for how we are able to cover this.
Yes, we would go through, we provide the board with updates as we've done in the past with the current fiscal year. And we would work with the FinCom as we tie out to our town meeting, if there's additional funding that's needed. But as the chief said, this is something that will fluctuate depending on who's covering that overtime shift, how that overtime shift is going to be covered, and then any other changes that we may have in staffing, whether temporary or permanent, when it comes to other needs within the fire department. But the idea would be to seek some support from the select board as well as FinCom and ultimately the town at a future town meeting should we need that budget coverage.
Which is consistent with past precedent where we've done this before.
Yes, this is on an overtime basis. This is the same thing. So just to be clear, we're not looking to hire a new firefighter. We're looking to increase the number of firefighters we have on the overnights for the evening shifts to 9 to match what we have in the day. So this would be an overtime basis, similar to Marianne, just as you said, similar to what we've presented before town meeting in the past. But what I would anticipate, should there be support for this, it would be at a higher amount than we've done in the past, in the recent past anyway.
That's correct.
Town meeting support.
John, quick question. So when and I agree with Marianne about 9 on night, that gives us 1.5 ambulances. How many do we have now? People will want to know. Is it 1.25, 1.5, 1?
So
give me the magic number.
Yeah. So during the day, we run at 1.5. If we're at 9, if we're at 8 at night, we're basically running 1. Now, just so everybody knows, the Westwood Fire Department owns 3 ambulances. We will never staff 3 ambulances around the clock. That 3rd ambulance is in there so we can always put 2 ambulances in play. That's the reason we have 3 ambulances. There's a concept out there that we have 3 ambulances and we should be staffing 3 ambulances. That is not how our system works. We have 2 ambulances that we're trying to staff 24 hours a day. The 3rd is a backup if one of those has to go out for service or repair, God forbid.
So I think just to get the broad view on what we're talking about here, there's the immediate issue we want to address, and I think we've got some consensus around this, which is to get us to 9 at night immediately using OT overtime. And then there's the larger issue of getting us to 11, which would involve hires, 4 hires.
Correct.
Which is a much larger budget issue, which I would recommend that we support strongly the notion that we work toward that as we start our budget process for 25, keeping in mind that at the same time, we've got the SAFER grant application out there, which, fingers crossed, may come in around the time we start that process, which will be soon, which would be phenomenal. But in any event, not to rely on that, but to work toward that in the FY25 budget so that we can get there.
And Marianne, if I can just add,
Please.
we will take what the board is saying, factor that into our FY25 budget proposal or budget process, as we will do and continue to do with our sustainable budget model. I think it's important to understand that we still have a sustainable budget model that we need to adhere to, and then present the board with the information that we have as we go through that budget process, as well as a finance and warrant committee.
Understood. With respect to getting to 9 at night, if there is consensus with my colleagues on that, I would entertain a motion to support the recommendation to staff up to 9 at night immediately.
I move that the select board, and is there, so I move the select board authorize the chief to go to 9 members at night, matching the daytime staffing as soon as is possible, based on the recommendation of the chief here tonight.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Thank you very much for your support. And I'll make a call right now and make it happen immediately, starting tomorrow night.
Thank you,
And
Chief.
John, you can't see it, but if you look at the bow on the ship, which is why I picked that background, the name of that ship is the SAFER grant. So it's coming your way.
Perfect. That's what we want to see, Joe. Thank you very much.
Keep those fingers crossed.
And just before we leave the staffing discussion, relative to FY25 and staffing toward 11, Joe and Rob, are you in agreement that is something that we should be moving toward, understanding that we have to have a sustainable budget, but that is something that is a priority?
Yes, I think it's, we have to know what the gap is that we're trying to fill. This is not unlike where we were at budget steering last year as we went into things with the schools and some of the significant, shortfalls they had due to unfunded mandated programs, right? So this is very, very similar as we know right now that you're starting the budget steering process with a hole to fill. And we need, I know that when we get to the point of having new growth certified, that will help. If Joe, if that boat is truly that grant and it's coming in, I'd love to see it come in December so that we're presenting things to FinCon that we know are sustainable.
Let me get out of the way.
But I also know that we need to plan as if it's not coming in, right?
Yes. And Mary and I agree with your plan. I think that's a solid plan.
Great. Chris, is there anything else we need to cover on this issue?
No, Madam Chair. I want to thank the board for the support and for the chief for his recommendation. And Travis, thank you for your time.
Yes.
Absolutely. Chris, do you want me to stay for the next item, or do you not need me to stay?
It's a public meeting. You're certainly welcome to stay.
Oh boy.
All right. So moving on then, our third fire item tonight is revisiting the feasibility study with Dora and Whittier. Looks like we've got Chip Heitkamp, Jason Harris from Dora and Whittier. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You bet. Chris, I think I'll turn this over to you to start us off on this piece.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the board may recall, we had a full presentation from Dawn Whittier at your July 12th meeting regarding the feasibility work that they've done. They provided 3 locations within that corridor, that response corridor that Travis and Dawn Whittier have identified. Asked them to come back and just to refresh the board and those who are watching on those 3 locations, and then the chief and I would like to make a recommendation to the board thereafter. So Chip or Jason, I don't know which one's going to be leading this.
Happy to lead it. Also, I believe Don is maybe attending, but has not been promoted. Is that possible that Don's in the audience? Don Walter?
Let me see.
Here he comes. All right, great. So yeah, happy to lead the conversation. I don't know, we can share the so the presentation is the same one as last time. We can share that presentation if unless Trish already has it queued up, but I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, if you could share it, that'd be great.
Okay. Let me just
maybe we jump right to the options.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
And for the board's benefit, when I'm not asking Dawn Whittier to go through the presentation again, just to go to that point of the presentation where they talked about the locations.
Yeah, great.
And welcome, Don.
Thank you.
All right. So let me share screen here. So all right. So this is the set, like kind of the slide of the 3 sites that we used. 3 sites, 4 options.
Chip, it's not being shared yet.
We're not seeing the shared screen.
Zoom always has that one more step. I apologize.
There you go.
Yep. So this slide here, this is the three sites with the 4 options that we were looking at. The 2 options are the existing site, the ad reno, which we discussed last time. Not a great result for the town based on the amount of money it would cost. Recommending one of the other 3 options were kind of that the short list, if you will. That the landlocked site behind Starbucks was reviewed, and then the town hall site with the police station also reviewed as an option. So let me just there we go. So again, there we went over the pros and cons, and just a reminder: all of these all fit with the response study that Travis performed, and they all do work for the programming exercise that we did with the chief. So just right out of the gate, all the options, check those few boxes. Like I mentioned earlier, the existing fire station, the ad reno, would not be the best allocation of funds for the town to give you the building that you so need in town. The other option that we looked at is through the landlocked site behind the Starbucks. Unfortunately, there was hopes that we would be able to unlock this with 722 High Street. That plan did not check out. So that one, unless something was to change in that, then this site kind of becomes not an option as well, unless something was to change. The town hall site, obviously a very good option from a public safety campus perspective. The obvious unknown there, or hurdle to get over there, would be, what do we do with town hall? That would be an entirely additional project, and we understand that as far as where that falls on the town's pecking order of buildings in need, may not be next on the list. So for that and some other reasons, kind of refocused on the existing site, getting the new program on this site and getting as much parking as possible, while keeping the size of the building usable for all those items. And now, like, as you recall, we one of the next things we're looking at is is the building massing and how that comes together. So kind of fitting it into the context of the site. But so those are the sites, and a quick reminder, review of what those entailed. Chris, I don't know if we want to take any questions, if there's been any questions on those.
So, Chip, Madam Chair, I don't know if the board has any questions from the last presentation on July 7th, on July 12th that you'd like to ask. If not, we can certainly move forward with the recommendation.
I do not. Do my colleagues?
No.
No, Bob.
Go ahead, Chris.
So Chief Deckers, Molly, Stephanie, and I have certainly, and Tish has been part of this conversation. Pat has been part of this conversation. Given the 3 or the 4 options of the 3 sites, the recommendation that we're making to the board for your consideration would be to a rebuild on the existing site. And if the board is supportive of that, what would happen is Downey would then go back, finish their feasibility study with that location, or if the board chooses a different location, with that chosen location. And the goal would be, we're looking at an October timeframe of that final feasibility report to be completed. Is that correct, Chip?
Yes, that is accurate. Yep.
And with the existing location, Madam Chair, that would also include temporary facility, a temporary station, as part of that feasibility report.
And could someone address for us what would be entailed in that further feasibility study as to the one location?
So what we would do is we've already analyzed the existing building for all of our consultants have visited the building to kind of assess its needs. So the report would be encompassing all of the existing data to support the decisions that the administration's making to move to this preferred option. What we would take to the next steps and what's left kind of our tasks ahead of us would be the buildings massing, kind of getting that like the public face aesthetic, and then incorporate that with the plan and the programming, which we've done with the chief, because adding the 3rd dimension, adding the massing, that plan's going to get tweaked again. The program needs to be maintained. So we'll basically be taking all 3 of those components and then basically getting them into a deliverable for the cost estimators. So we're hoping to get that to the cost estimator early September. They'll need it for a couple weeks, and then we would turn that around and basically, insert, the supporting data, the building, the new program, the new building, and the costs associated with that, including, as Chris just mentioned, the temporary operations, which if we take this route, we will need to relocate the department on a multi-year basis, so they can run out of another location while we completely remove and replace the existing building on the existing site. So all of that would be compiled, and last thing we would insert would be the cost estimates, and then we'd have the final deliverable for the town.
Thank you. Very helpful. Questions or comments from my colleagues?
No, originally I was going to ask about the temporary relocation and whether that would be part of the feasibility study and the costs associated with that. So that was why I'd raised my hand.
The only question I have, Marianne, is previously in there was some discussion. I'm going to call it the IT backbone for the town's infrastructure is currently located at this location, and has that been taken into consideration? How you're going to handle that in that time frame?
The INET.
You can answer that question if you like.
Please.
Yeah, so Joe, we call that the INET. We have had conversations with Dawn Whittier, with our IT director, and our procurement officer, along with almost everyone on this call from the town side. And we are working with Comcast to look at some options. We also, there's been some work done with Dawn Whittier's assistance, along with Michelle Miller, our procurement agent, reaching out to some other communities, one particular community on the North Shore, and work that they've done regarding the INET. So we have a few options that we've been discussing: moving it and then moving it back if the board supported the recommendation at the existing location, or moving it to a new location and keeping it at that location. So we're looking at the options there as well as the cost.
So that's being included with the Dore and Whittier proposal. Oh, John, you're on mute, I think.
That will not be, that is a separate scope. So that will be something I believe Donna on the IT side is kind of taking control of. We will obviously coordinate anything related to the building itself. And as you said, that piece that is in the building, our drawings, we will have to, help orchestrate maybe some of that depending on the timing of the IT backbone, the INET work. So yeah, that's all up for debate. The actual that project in and of itself will be a little separate. It's a little different than Dore and Whittier and our consultants. We don't do too much directly with utilities unless it's just coordinating the work and as it connects to our project.
Chris, is there any discussion about having redundancy for that IT backbone?
That'll all be part of the work that we're doing right now. We do not have redundancy. We do have backup as part of from a generator standpoint. We do have some backup as far as the cloud, but this is a connection point-to-point connection that has been run through the cable license agreement that the town has had with Comcast. So this is something that we're working with Comcast, our IT director, on, as well as if we have to go out and procure it for ourselves or through a third party. Those are some of the options that we're looking at. And this could be done either in conjunction with this project or at a separate time, ideally before the project would begin. So we're looking at as two separate RFPs.
I see this as being kind of an Achilles heel on this, so it'd be nice to get it right the first time.
I agree 100%, Joe.
How are we feeling about the recommendation as to the existing site? Joe and Rob? I'm comfortable with it.
I am as well.
I like the idea of a new building at the current site. New building, not a renovated building.
Yep. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we should take a vote to complete the feasibility study as to that site, but I want to make sure there aren't any other questions that we need answered first. If not, I'll entertain a motion, Rob.
Okay. I move that the select board provide approval to Chris and Dora Whittier to proceed with the feasibility study for a new building on the existing site of Fire Station 1.
I'll second that motion.
Right, roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To all of you from Dore and Whittier. We're excited to be moving on this path and to be moving to this next step. This is a very important project, as you know, for our town, and we're excited to be moving forward with you. We partnered with you on a number of projects over the years, and we're looking forward to partnering with you on this. Thank you all.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the thoughtful discussion too. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Very good.
Right.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
You as well.
Okay, so moving on with our agenda onto new business. We have a discussion regarding the Hale conservation restriction. We've got an update on that, and I will turn this over to Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I'm going to recuse myself from this portion of the discussion.
Yes, of course. And we will let you know when to come back, Rob.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
So thank you, Madam Chair. As the board is aware, the board authorized Pat and myself to sit down and have conversations with Hale. We've had several meetings with Hale representation as well as representation from the trustees of reservation, including we had representation from the town of Dover talking about a draft CR document. The agreement that was discussed amongst those three parties, being the town of Westwood, the town of Dover, and Hale, was that we wanted to get consensus by all three on the draft agreement. Now, the draft agreement, it's important to understand the draft agreement has not been voted on by the Board of Selectmen, by the Select Board, excuse me. It's the draft agreement based off of those conversations that we've had, that Pat and I have participated in. As late as 5 o'clock early this evening, it was brought to my attention that there's still some language that one entity has some concerns with, and we need to discuss and finalize. So we're not asking the board to release the draft document as of yet, but what we are asking is for the board to authorize the town administrator or designee to release that document once the three parties have agreed on the draft version. So again, this is not a version that the board is voting on, but just a version that the board would authorize us to release. In addition to that, Madam Chair, also looking to see for the board to support us with any revisions to that draft agreement, that we would then release that and place that on our website so residents can see the different versions as they become available.
Thank you, Chris. I certainly think it makes sense to publish that draft document as soon as there is agreement to do so. Looking forward to having that document made public so that we can then have a discussion about it as a town. I don't think there's anything we don't need to take any action tonight, Chris, is that correct? Oh, you're on.
I would ask the board support releasing the draft document, authorizing the town administrator and the designee to release that draft document once the three entities have agreed to it, and any revisions thereof. And just for the board's clarification, town council is part of those discussions, and he would have an opportunity to review that draft document before it's released.
Of course.
I'll be involved.
All right. Well, Joe, any questions or comments?
None. I'm ready.
All right. Go ahead.
So I'll make a motion that we authorize the town administrator and or his designee, once the three parties, which I'm assuming is Dover, Westwood, and the Hale people,
Yes.
have I'm going to say ratified or their agreement, and release that upon, as well as accept any revisions that will be adopted during that process. Did I hit them all, Chris?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
I will second that motion. I will second that motion out of necessity. Roll call, Joe?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you, Chris, for that update. Let's see, can we get Rob back in for the next?
I just sent a text, Madam Chair. Ask him to rejoin.
Pat, you're on mute.
If you're going to do the conflict of interest statement, Rob should stay recused.
Okay, very good.
Sorry, let me ask him to stay out.
I spoke to him earlier in the day.
Okay, looks like he's off. So we'll now move to the conflict of interest waiver. Pat, are you going to handle this?
Sure, I'm happy to. So Hale has.
Oh, you're on mute, Pat.
Hale has asked that they be allowed to use Dan Bailey as their counsel, and he has agreed to do it in a way such that it would not cross paths with his representation of the town. I am okay with the way it's being set up, and I am okay with this. And I think it will actually help expedite discussions as we move forward. And Mr. Bailey is available if you have questions for him.
We've reviewed the documentation. I am comfortable with it as well. Do you need us to vote on this, Pat?
I do.
Okay. Joe, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'd be happy to make a motion that we proceed with
So the motion, Joe, should be you authorize the town administrator to sign the letter that was in your packet waiving the conflict of interest.
I couldn't have said it better, Pat.
So just say so move.
So move.
And I second that out of necessity. Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Good
Mr.
to
Big.
see, good to see you, Dan.
Good to see you.
So now we can get Rob back.
Yes.
Send him a text.
Okay. Rob is back. We can move on to our next agenda item, which is the Integrated Collective Bargaining Agreement with the Westwood Police Association. And Molly, I assume you'll be taking lead on this.
I would love to.
Thank
So
you.
back in April, the board approved the memorandum of agreement between the town of Westwood and the Westwood Police Association for FYs 24, 25, and 26. This is just the clerical work of integrating the changed language from that MOA into one collective bargaining agreement. So the town and the union have agreed on the language. The full integrated CBA is in front of you, and I'm looking for the board's signature on that document, which will then be uploaded to the town's website.
Terrific. I have no questions on this. Any questions or comments from my colleagues?
None.
I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board authorize the approval of this collective bargaining agreement, and I assume, Molly, you're going to make it available for us to sign at the police station?
Yep.
You need what signatures on this, yes?
Electronic signatures are fine.
Okay, and there, okay, then I will say that allowing the fixation of electronic signatures for the select board.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you, Molly. And I think we have you up on our next item, which is the integrated, sorry?
Madam Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from this.
Yes, sir. Our next item is the Integrated Collective Bargaining Agreement with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Back to you, Molly. Thank you.
So that United Food and Commercials is the other term for Public Works. So similarly, back in April, the board approved the memorandum of agreement between the town of Westwood and the DPW union for FY 24, 25, and 26. This was a slightly more complicated integration, as the contract had not been integrated since FY 2006, 7, 8, 9. So it took a little bit longer, but it's finally done, and the town and the union have agreed on the language. So similarly, I am looking for signatures onto this contract, which will then be uploaded to the town's website.
Terrific. Any questions or comments on this?
None for me.
None.
All right, I'll entertain the motion.
I move for the select board to approve the agreement with the Integrated Collective Bargaining with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 1445 for fiscal years 24 through 26.
Second.
And I'm sorry, Joe, and for the electronic signatures, the select board to be affixed there too.
Second again.
Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Molly, thank you very much for all your work
Thank
on
you.
this. We are now going to move to old business. The first agenda item under old business is a transfer of funds to Westwood Media Center. I'm going to recuse myself. Tish, if you wouldn't mind letting me know when to come back in, and I'll hand this over to you, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, so as we typically do, we have a schedule of payments that come in from the various cable companies. We have an amount totaling $50,795.23 coming in from Comcast, and we have a Verizon payment of $44,200, and a second payment from Verizon that is $40,638.97. So I would entertain a motion to authorize the transfer of funds totaling those amounts to Westwood Media Center.
So moved.
Okay, roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well, out of necessity.
Did we have a second? Did I not?
Didn't hear a second.
Okay.
I'd like to second that motion.
No, you can't second.
Oh, you
it.
can't.
I actually have to second it, Joe.
Yeah, okay.
That was my miss.
Okay.
So I second the motion, and then I will take a roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Okay, we can get Mary Ann back in for boards and committees.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Moving on to appointments and reappointments on boards and committees. Chris, I will turn this over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as the board, as we've made in the past recommendations, when we have vacancies, the department head or the chair and I, or a representative from the committee, will conduct some informal discussions, not interviews, but informal discussions with interested parties. And we have some new members that we're going to be recommending, and we also have some reappointments. I'm just going to ask Tish if you just read through the reappointments, and I can share with the board the process that we've had, that we took for each of those vacancies.
Sure. So for the Conservation Commission, we have one reappointment. That's Vesna Maneva. Would like to be reappointed for a new 3-year term. Do you want to take it by committee or just do them all? How do you want to handle it?
I think if we could vote all of them, if that's acceptable, Pat?
I think you can do that.
Okay.
So that then we go on to the Council on Aging. We have one reappointment and 3 new members. This board has 3 new members because 3 of their existing members just completed their 2nd term. And so due to the bylaws, they cannot be appointed to a 3rd term. So they have 3 new appointments. Chris and Lena met with 2 of the residents, Mary Joyce and Wendy Wilhelm, and are recommending them for appointment. And then in addition, Lena Arena DeRosa would like to appoint Michael Walsh as a new member and reappoint Robert Folsom for a 2nd term. And then we have one election officer. Dottie Powers is asking the board to appoint Charlene Sotolongo as an election officer for a 1-year term. And then WEAC has a very similar situation as the Council of Aging. They have 1 reappointment and 2 new members. They have a similar caveat in their bylaws that no member can be eligible for reappointment to a 3rd full term unless there are no candidates to fill vacancies in the committee membership or 1 year has elapsed from and after the expiration of that member's 2nd term. So they have 3 openings, 1 due to a term limit with Stephen Hart, 1 due to a resignation, Juliana Belding has submitted her resignation, and the 3rd due to a member not wishing to continue. So Chris and the chair, Kate LaCroix, met with Geeta Singh and Beverly Rainforth and have recommended both of them for appointment. And then Kate LaCroix would like the board to consider reappointing Steve Hart, who just finished his 2nd term, therefore reaching his term limit, for another term. So that will be up to the board tonight if they would like to do that.
So Madam Chair, as I said, either the department head or the chair and I and Tish participate in discussions with the candidates, and these recommendations come in full support from that group, from Conservation, Council on Aging, and we act. So we have some really great people interested in serving the town in these capacities, and we fully recommend those recommendations to the board at this time.
That's terrific. And I'll just add that we also have the materials that have been submitted by the applicants for these positions. And once again, we're just so lucky to have folks who are so passionate and skilled and willing to serve the town of Westwood. We're so very blessed by that.
All right, I would move that the select board make the following appointments: to Conservation Commission, Vanessa Maneva; to Council on Aging, a reappointment of Robert Folsom; and new members Mary Joyce, Wendy Wilhelm, and Michael Walsh; an election officer, Charlene Sotolongo; and to the Westwood Environmental Action Committee, reappointment of Stephen Hart, and new members Beverly Rainforth and Geeta Singh.
I'll second the motion.
Right, roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Well, thank you, Chris. And again, thanks to all of our new and reappointed members. Thank you for your service. Continuing on with our agenda, next we have the approval of our regular meeting minutes from July 12th, 2023. Does anyone have any edits, additions, or suggestions for the minutes?
I had no changes.
Thought they were great.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
All right, I move that the select board approve the minutes from the July 12th, 2023 meeting as written.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you. So now we will move to public and press. Gary Usalian, if you are still on, if you could please add your address, because we don't have it there, and we need that to read your comment. But I'll go to the next comment we received. This is from Kathy Wallace, 283 Farm Lane. What date was this SAFER application made? Why wasn't this information on the SAFER grant shared prior to tonight? Were the select board members aware that this application was made? I would think this would be a decision that the select board would approve in an open meeting, or at least know about, given the budget implications. It should have been made known when the FY24 budget was being developed. 11 is the minimum staff that we need now. Why did we not apply for the optimum number, which is 14, that the operational study should have shown us tonight? We did not get any data tonight as the board requested on 7/12/23. Okay. A lot of questions in there, Kathy. Let's see if we can get to that. Chief, were you trying to respond to that? I wasn't sure.
No, we had talked to you, the board, previously, and I also went through Chris, giving you a heads up that we were moving in this direction with the SAFER grant. I just wanted to get the message back out there because there was some confusion that we had not applied for a SAFER grant, but we have, in anticipation that we might need to use it. The beauty of those grants is you can always turn it down. If the town had made a decision that their level of service was fine at 9, we could have turned that grant down. So we wanted to make sure that we were in the process so it didn't delay us any further to get to 11. And that was the situation. At no point in time has the data supported an optimum number of 14. The optimum number for us is 11. That's what the the data has supported all along. That's what the report from Travis has supported, and that's what the report from ESCI has supported. And that was, what we voted on this evening. So that 14 number is not an optimal number. The optimal number for us is 11.
Thank you, Chief. Okay. I do have an address from Gary Usalian, 9 Adams Street, as to his message. Pat, is it okay for me to read something that wasn't an agenda item?
But I'm going to limit you the discussion. So you can certainly read his question, but I don't think a discussion of it would be proper because it was not on the agenda and people have not had an opportunity. You made an announcement tonight about a public meeting, not what conditions are precedent to that public meeting. That's something you'll have to take up later if you so choose.
Okay, so I can read the comment, but we won't discuss it. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay. So this is Mr. Usalian's comment. The residents of Canton Street and surrounding neighborhoods want to, I think it's no, if the town is to mark the trees along Canton Street that are to be removed before the meeting in September. Residents need to get a better understanding of the impacts being proposed that is far beyond the sidewalk proposal study warrant in town meeting. Thank you. All right. And then there is, he wrote, I'm sorry, I missed your comment, Gary. It was no that I read. Sorry, I missed that. Okay, now we also have a comment from Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. Given the egregious lack of completeness of the contracted work from Criterion, why are we asking his opinion on how we should proceed? Why does going to 9 staff at night require board approval when there are supposed to be 10 in each working group, as is publicly stated? How does going to 9 without adding to staff? Our staff is already overworked. Will the 11 minimum be a constant minimum, or will the board be approving dropping to 10? I think that I'll take part of this, and Chief, perhaps you can take some of this. The issue about going to 9 at night is that we need the overtime funds in order to get there. And so we have approved that. We have budgeted for 10 in our budget, but the reality is such that with vacations and disability and so forth, that it's not always the case that we have that. Chief, did you want to respond at all to the rest of this?
Yeah, so the one thing that's important to know is that the budget is set annually and there's a factor in there of overtime. And that's why we came to the board this evening, because we know we are going to be well over the $662,000 that were allocated. To make that move, I wanted to make sure the board was aware that we were going to be doing that if we go to 9 and what the potential was going to be. Going to 9 right now, adding staffing isn't going to change. Adding staffing to 11, we're going to have to replace to 11. So every time somebody is out, we're going to replace that person. And that's going to require people to work overtime. All of our members know that when they were hired, at least when I did my hiring, that there's going to be ample overtime to fill because our goal was to fill, person for person. That's there. The goal is to spread that out amongst the 40 plus individuals within the organization. And that's the goal of the budgeting process. So that's why we did what we did with that.
Okay. I have two more comments from Kathy Wallace. I read her address earlier. I'm sorry, I no longer see it. I think it's Farm Lane. I'm going to ask the second one first, Chief. I think this has been addressed, but she says, what date was this safer application made? 14 is the number we should get to. Criterion says 11 is the minimum now, and there is a lot of growth on the horizon for Westwood. Can you answer
So
that one, Chief?
Yes. So I don't have the exact date in front of me. I'm in Missouri right now at a conference, so I don't have that information directly in front of me. But it was submitted right towards the end of the submittal period, which was the end of February of 23. In and around the 28th is when that was submitted. 14 again is not the correct number. None of the data supports that. Criterion has absolutely said 14 is not the number. The additional growth that is projected in the town may increase our call volume based on historical data. 30 to 40 calls per year. It's not outside the realm of what our people can support and run. That's the data. The data speaks for itself. 14 is not the number.
Thank you, Chief. And then there's one other question from Kathy Wallace and comment. She says, thank you for this promising information on a new station. Unlike other buildings in town, this building should be all about the firefighters since they use it 24/7 and residents will rarely be in the building. Can you commit to having at least 2 firefighters, lieutenants, or captains on the working group? Can these meetings be on Zoom and available to the public? Can they be recorded for later viewing on WMC, Westwood Media Center, as they do for the Long Range Financial Planning Committee? Will there be a project plan and schedule posted on the town's website, as was done for the Hanlon Deerfield project? When is the next working group meeting for the new station? Well, at this point, I would say that you've heard what the plan is with respect to the feasibility study, which is to get that feasibility study done. And that will be presented to us, and then we'll be taking the next step on what is recommended at that point in time. And as everyone watching probably knows, we've got a long history and a successful one here in Westwood in terms of constructing new buildings with respect to the Islington Fire Station, Pine Hill, and I expect that we will be following the good models that we have for public engagement. But exactly what those working groups are going to look like, it would be premature for me to say. I don't know if anyone else has a comment on that.
Wouldn't this be the purview of the PBC once the project is officially greenlit?
Yes.
Yes.
The PBC is responsible for construction projects within the town.
And before we start construction, we've got a number of steps to go through to get there.
Could I ask
Madam
one
Chair, if I might add to the commitment of having firefighters and lieutenants and captains on the working group, that is all there. The firefighters, lieutenants, and captains were all given a survey to start with. Once we come down to the final parts of this project, and as Mr. Gotti pointed out, once this gets greenlit, those working groups would be developed inside, because yes, a portion of that building houses the firefighters. The other portion, handles all the administrative function and the supporting services of the organization. So there's twofold. The firefighters will be intimately involved in their in the creation of their living space and workout and all that kind of stuff, because they're the ones going to be using it. So I'll make that commitment that there will be firefighters, lieutenants, and captains on it. We had already sent out a survey and asked people to sign up if they were interested, and we have about 7 individuals out of the current 42 that have expressed an interest in being part of those committees. When we're ready to turn that on, they'll be invited back to the game.
So, that's great.
Madam Chairman, one other point: the charter also calls for the moderator to appoint people from within who are going to use the building to be part of the permanent building committee or commission for that particular project. So that's also involved.
Thank you. Joe, did you have a comment?
I did. I don't think I heard it correctly. John, did you say that, and this is going back to what I asked Molly in the very beginning, because I always found this fascinating to try to do this forecasting, but did you say your 600,000 was your OT budget and it's running low now? Did I misunderstand you?
Yes, our current budget is budgeted at 662,000 roughly. And we're actually, that's below what we actually need to staff to the 9 and 8 that we've been staffing to. And we've always come back to the town and requested supplements at the end of the year. Part of that was offset by monies from FEMA over the past couple of years due to the pandemic. And prior to that, we made decisions operationally to put the brakes on different types of spending so we could come in within our budget. This budget that I presented tonight to you, that $380,000 to $410,000, actually puts us at the right number for 9. There's a number for 10, and then there's a number for
385 to 410 additional to the 662.
Correct.
Okay.
If
Okay,
Joe, before you, Chief, if I'm hearing you correctly, that's 662. In the past, you've had to come to the select board for additional funds because overtime has run beyond that budgeted number, whatever the budgeted number was in any given year. So there is the 400 or 385 to 410 or whatever the number is that you just gave us for the not going to 9, and there's a possibility of what would have been your ask at the end of the year if that 662 were not sufficient. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct. We would have, just based on the past couple of years, we would have been coming to the town and been asking for a supplement. And I worked very closely with Stephanie and Pam Dukeman prior to that of where we're at, what's going on. I show her everyone where we are on a payroll basis, what we've used for overtime, how it looks, what we're forecasting based on injuries, based on sick leave, based on everything that we have going on.
Yeah, we forecast. It's impossible for you to say what that number will be until you actually know who the personnel are backfilling in an overtime slot, given differences in grade and et cetera, et cetera. So
right, because the overtime actually goes from a minimum of like $45 an hour to almost $87 an hour. So it depends on who's filling what spots and how it plays out, but we've averaged it out to our overtime cost is about $60 an hour to fill those vacancies.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got a couple more comments or questions. The next one from Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. She says, the below question was not answered. Given the egregious lack of completeness of the contracted work from Criterion, why are we asking his opinion on how we should proceed? Fran, I guess I would say that Criterion did provide us with a number of data, and we asked a lot of questions on the board about that to dig into that. And in addition, we were provided with data and information from the chief on which we've made our decision. And you were witness to our decision making. that's how I would answer that. And then there is another comment from Kathy Wallace, Farm Lane. She wrote, "They should be involved as soon as the next meeting. Please make that happen. It troubles me that the answer is no, absolutely yes, and not just in living quarters." I think that relates to having fire personnel involved with respect to the new fire station. And I think, Chief, you've already addressed that the fire department staff has been involved from the beginning as far as a survey, and they will continue to be involved going forward. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. I want to thank everybody who has participated with their questions and comments. And I want to announce that our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, August 28, 2023 at 6 p.m. via Zoom. With that, we are at the end of our agenda, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second that with the understanding that, Marianne, you took the bull by the horns in the very beginning here as far as the staffing with the firefighters. I commend you for that. So I think you set the tone right there. It was well done. And I will second Rob's motion.
Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you all, and good night, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you, board.